Hi, everyone. And I am just so excited because I'm just going to kind of jump right in because I did an intro ahead of time, Lori. But I have one of my also dream guests here today. And I'm so excited to have you here, Lori, because this has been not only just such a big few years in business, but it has been just so incredible being in your network, being in your world. So welcome, Lori Harder, to the show.
I'm so excited to finally be here. When you want to do it in person and you live in Canada, it makes it a little harder.
I know. And actually, in our episode that we did earlier, Ali Ruda's here too. We did an episode with Inbal Claudio. It was awesome. And we talked a lot about boundaries, like when building community. And I was actually singing your praises because I was like, a no has never felt better than a no from Lori Harder, because it comes with love, where you're building community, you're doing the thing. But the only time I ever hear is your events and your events with Chris. And you guys have really great boundaries around your events to like keep your energy high and all of that. And like, I actually really respect that rather than like doing things out of a place of like resentment.
You know what's crazy is if you would have met like the probably 5-year ago version of me, you wouldn't have even recognized me. And so the boundaries that you might feel are simply around me wanting to do this long term and me really wanting to actually love our people. And so whenever I would feel like resentment around something, it was always because I didn't have a boundary in place. It wasn't them. Like at all. It was because I was either like exhausting myself or doing something that made me feel a certain way, that I'm like, you could put a boundary in place and fall back in love with what you're doing.
I love that, because it's so easy, I think, when we see other people set boundaries, for us to like really make it about them and really put a negative spin on it.
Oh my God.
Like,
I did it for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I have names that I'm not even going to say that I'm like, let me just tell you who I hated. Like, I loved them and then you hate them because you're like, wait, why can't we be besties? And because they're busy and they already have their friends in their lives. And, you need to add a lot of value to someone in order to become their friend. And so a lot of times when we have these relationships with podcast hosts or with authors, like, it's a very one-way relationship. They're not feeling it as much because they're not listening to you all day long in their ears and creating these connections. So it's a weird world that we live in right now, where it's really easy to be upset over people's boundaries. But the second that you start really doing the thing that you want to do, whether it's big events or more podcasts, you'll look back and go, oh my gosh, I need to learn from them because now it's happening to me.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. And actually, that's kind of why I want to talk to you about like so many things on this podcast. And I'll tell you, Lori, like, I think I've said this to you before, but originally, like, my foray into your world was through Chris, really through his podcast. We started the Social Snippet, and I remember going to my business partner, Maria, and being like, oh, Maria, like, this guy's so right. Like, we can make mad cash over here, tons, and also be so generous and let that be like our motivator. And these like amazing people can have wealth. Because I think I had this like block around money where I was like, oh, like, people with lots of money, they're bad people.
Well, I was growing up, had that same view.
And then
totally get that.
You're surrounded by people like you and Chris and lots of amazing people in my network who have had amazing successes and yet, are so generous. And so it's funny. I remember Chris coming to speak at Fast Foundations, which I had done the online round with you guys and then did the in-person. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, Lori Harder's here. And I'm like, Lori Harder, like, that's cool. Like, I didn't boo you.
I'm here for Chris.
Yeah, like, I was like a Chris girl. I was like, yeah, Lori's cute. Look at that hat. Like, that's...
Yeah.
But then...
It was my boho era, by the way.
Yeah, you were in a boho era.
I really was. Hardcore, and now we're out.
You're out of it?
Yeah.
You were in I think, like a floor-length dress and a hat.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
But you look beautiful. It's still great. But it was funny because I was like, oh, like, Lori's great. And then I heard you talk and I was like, Lori's great. Like, wow. And then, read A Tribe Called Bliss shortly after and kind of got more involved in your world. But what was so funny was I was talking to my best friend, Jenny, and I was like, oh, I'm going to this thing, like Chris Harder's thing. And she's like, is that Lori Harder's husband? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, I used to love Lori Harder back in my fitness days, like when I was really into fitness. And I have seen like the impact of your community where like I've only ever known you as a business leader and she knows you in this fitness way. And there's all these people that know you from Isogenics. And you've had these like many lives, but you've been able to like almost bring the same people with you through every iteration. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today, because like when building a community, I find like I've had that same experience where we've grown and we've done different things and people have come alongside. But you've like pivoted in like so many different directions and yet you're so like loved for it. Like, And I'd love to like kind of pick your brain on that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I love this topic.
Because I'm curious for you, like, has there ever been any fear around the pivot?
Yeah, I mean, there's always fear around the pivot, but I'm super tuned into the fact that when we hit what we think is a slump or boredom, that's your next level. And so when you don't start acting in accordance with your next level, that's when your life starts to get miserable. And so I think I'm so clear on this fact that the pain of pivoting is far less than what I know happens. And when I say what I know happens, it's truly, there's a beautiful quote by Richard Rohr. I say it all the time because I'm so obsessed with it. But if you don't learn how to transform your pain, you will transfer it. And I believe that when you ignore the pivot, which is just your evolution, when you ignore the evolution, the next level, or the pivot, I think that you start to feel that pain. And what happens is if you don't like transform it into like a reason why you need to do the next thing, or, you know, your whole purpose of why you need to start this other thing for other people, then you're going to start transferring it to all the people around you. Meaning, like, I didn't graduate high school. So when I was thinking of going into like a bigger career that would require more from me, I felt so resentful of everyone around me because I wasn't facing my fear of just going for it and taking the personal trainer's test and actually following through until I stopped failing it. And I was so resentful of people because I was like, this is your fault. I didn't, you know, Mom and Dad, this is your fault. I didn't complete school. Mom, this is your fault. I have anxiety because you have panic attacks too. And instead of facing what you need to face, which always for your next level or your next pivot is your fear, and you have to go into that thing. If you don't do it, look what I was doing. I'm mad at my mom. I'm mad at my dad. I got mad at my husband. And you can either go down that road of it's everybody else's fault but mine, or you can look at you and go, what's the scary thing that you are avoiding? And so for me with the pivots, I already know that is coming. The isolation and the blame game will start coming if you don't go into the pivots. And I want to avoid that. I don't want to make it anyone else's problem. It's not. It's my problem.
I just want to quickly tell you that I think of you every single time I eat a chicken nugget.
So we have a chicken nugget story, you guys, where I got in a fight with Chris because I was in that exact spot of I wasn't facing my fear. I knew I wanted to go and do something, but I was literally had this moment of blaming my husband. I had gone out to the bars, drank too much. I went out with him, came home, ordered a bunch of chicken nuggets on the way home, and just had a full-on meltdown and started chucking them at his head and blaming him for everything, for my life. And then I had an out-of-body experience in the middle of chucking nuggets at his head. And I was like, you're going to push everybody away if you don't face your fears. And so McDonald's played a big role in my transformation.
Allie and I were talking earlier on the first podcast about how McDonald's was not an energetic match for her for sponsorship. And I'm wondering, Lori, do you feel like McDonald's is an energetic match for you?
You know, it was an energetic match in terms of the vehicle I used to throw, but it's no longer an energetic match.
Well, I love what you're saying, Lori, because I think it's so easy, like when we're in it and we see people who have accomplished just so much as you have so far, and this is just the beginning for you, but like see it and be like, well, she never had that doubt. Like it's just so easy, like and really not see the hardships that kind of everybody goes through. And even thinking about like that fear and listening to you and Chris's story. I had Chris on my podcast about a year ago. He's the most downloaded episode. So
yeah,
but Lori,
you have to tell him.
He knows, but Lori, okay. I think you're gonna have to beat him. I was trying to instill.
What do we need to say in here to do it?
I was trying to instill some
polarizing or inspiring.
I don't know. I was trying to instill some kind of competition. She went right for support. So that's the kind of Lori. That's the kind of Lori energy. She was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" And I wanted you to be like, "No, like it's my turn. It's fine."
What an ass.
But it's so easy, I think, like when we're in it, like to just like really look at other people and see that level of like comparison. And I'm wondering, like in all of these areas of your life that you've built and all of these kind of trajectories you've had, like how did you keep away from that being that thing that you looked forward and being like, oh, like that person has it, or you know, those communities already have that, and kind of remain kind of present in what you're building?
Well, I did all of that. I got super jealous I compared myself. You guys, I'm 43. I had a good 5 years in there where I pretty much just cried and compared myself. Like, even if I did something, it's like now this new level is there. You find someone else to compare and cry about. Like, you cannot avoid the humanness of the journey. In fact, like it was one of the most important pieces for me. Like before I wrote my book, a lot of that was written because I got really jealous and like hurt over friend groups that wouldn't let me in. And so I gave a big 2 middle fingers up. I was like, well, fuck you guys.
That's going to be the clip.
But I had this moment of like, it's not their fault, but also I'm going to say like, bye to you guys in a loving way, but also like like, see you later. And I'm going to go start my own group. Like, stop chasing and start your own thing. This was such a lesson for me that was like one of the most painful, challenging lessons. And truly, I felt that way. Like I got to the point where, and they were doing nothing. They were living their life. They were being inspiring. It went from, and I know that girls have had this because I've had it. People have done it to me. I've done it to other women where people can get so close to you because they think that you're the goal. They don't realize like the things that you're doing are the goal, but that person as a friend is not the goal necessarily. Now, we get some great friends out of it sometimes when you're not expecting it. But if that's the goal, people feel that energy and oftentimes you'll never get in. Like you'll never be let in. And in my journey, it was truly my journey to not be let in by this specific group. And I was like, why aren't they inviting me on their stages? Why aren't they doing this? I did this. I did all of these amazing things, like years and years of reciprocity. The thing is, when you're doing those things, you can't have an expectation around it. Like nothing will come of it if truly the only reason you're doing it is for that expectation. You should be doing it knowing that if you do that long enough, good things, whether it's from them or other people, will come. And so that's been my biggest lesson that I hope other people hear is don't make it the goal to make those people your friends. Like absolutely follow them. Absolutely listen to the podcast. Go die hard for these people. Have girl crushes. Do all the things. But don't expect them to be your friends. Create your own. Start your own. Look for the people who are at the left and at the right of you who are doing the same thing and start that group, because I promise you in 2 to 5 years, those people who are next to you are going to be all the up and comers or all the stars. And so it's like, that's what you're craving. You're craving to be seen. At that point is typically like for me, I was craving validation. I was craving recognition. I was craving to be seen. And that can get really unhealthy if we're craving it from people who can't give it to us as well. You have to kind of give it to yourself.
Okay, I love that. And one of the most impactful things you've ever said to me, Lori, was actually, there's many. I quote you all the time. But one of the things is this idea of like looking at who you're coming up with. Because I think often when we go to events and we see people, it's like they want to be friends with the Lindsay. They want to be friends with, the person leading the event. Yep. And so even when we ran our event in January, I said this to you actually at Girlfriends in Business when everyone was like waiting in line to take pictures with you. And I was like, are you in a hostage situation? And you were like, no, I love this. Like I do this. And like, this is why this is here is because I get to connect with everyone. And I love that. And you're so authentic in that. And during High Vibe Women, I remember feeling like being on stage and being like, I don't know why these people are taking photos with me because it's actually like not about me. It's about the conversations that they're having at their tables. It's about the like conversations that I'm just like I'm the chicken nugget, like the vehicle.
Just throw me,
put the barbecue sauce, throw me at Chris's head. But like I'm just the chicken nugget over here. And so it's like, it's just interesting because I think we can so easily like want these relationships with people who are like so much farther ahead of us, but it's the one step, not the five, that I actually find are like the much more like impactful relationships. And I actually find that when you don't focus on the 5 step ahead, those happen over time organically.
Absolutely. Because what happens is you've started building something with the people next to you, which makes the people 5 steps ahead notice, oh, this girl does the work. This girl's a community builder. This girl's an up and comer. Instead of when we're looking to the 5 steps ahead, it feels like this energy of they're looking at me to be responsible for them to come up. And it's like, you have to take full responsibility for your own come up And then people notice that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So how do you maintain those boundaries? Like in terms of, we talked about this a little bit, but I'm sure like as you've been coming up, there's been so many people who've been hitting you up for friendship. And that's hard. Like, and Allie and Inbal and I were talking about this too, where, I feel like we're a few steps, behind and we're feeling that stress. So I can only imagine what you're feeling over there. How do you manage that and still remain respectful to the people who are like pouring into you and loving on you and like want to be at all your stuff, but then also at the same time being like, okay, I need to keep my circle close.
You know what's so interesting is I had it for a really long time, but then once I figured it out, your energy informs those people, so I don't get it much anymore. It's like so few and far. Like even when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I used to get that all the time, and I don't as much.
Interesting.
It's kind of like when girls are like, oh my God, all these guys hit on me. Like, okay, so when I was in fitness, okay, I'm just going to be super real here.
Can't wait.
When I was in fitness, all of these girls were like, oh my God, my DMs, so many men hit on me all the time, like in fitness competitions.
Yeah.
Like, I post these pictures and I get men and I'm like, I like never get that. Like ever. Like it was very rare. No, my energy was closed. It was very for the girls. And so I go and look and I'm like, well, I can see from your picture why, or like the energy that you're putting out.
Yes.
Or they would, these guys would write and I would see it in the captions, they'd be entertaining them back. And I'm like, I don't do that. So it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Like I see like when I was in the beginning of my business, I had to entertain everything back because it was like I had to figure out who I was. I had to figure out who I could help. I wanted those reps. So I would answer every question they would ask me in the DMs. I'd go super explicit into like how to do things. I just poured my heart out until one day I was like dead. Like I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I can't even actually be in this industry is what I thought for a little while. Wow. And that's what I want to keep people from feeling. Is that I don't think anyone should hit that point where they're like, I can't be in this. It's too much for me. And so I felt that way at my events. I felt it everywhere because I would get so sick afterward, like 2 weeks just down for the count. Because I would, I'd have a 3-day event and people would come up and they'd tell me about their trauma or that they'd been like hard stuff because I was open, a completely open channel. This is before I did the work around boundaries. So they'd, tell me while I'm running an event that they had been abused or raped. And I'm like, I didn't know how to hold that while I'm hosting an event. So what you feel now came from a place of complete and utter breakdown of how do I take care of myself and teach these women who are looking at me to how they should be acting. And this is their dream, but they're going to come to where I'm at and find that this is the worst thing they've ever experienced because you shut down. You can't do it. It's too much for someone. And so I had to do a lot of work around what that looks like how I hold myself, how much of my responding, like how have I prepped the volunteers for people to come up and take pictures? Are we doing pictures at this? Do I actually need to? Is that something that I think that I need to add for value? Or is that something because I'm like paranoid they won't like me enough or I didn't add enough value? Like where is it coming from when I do these things that I'm doing? Because looking back, in all honesty, some of the things that I was doing and pouring myself out for was a fear that the event wasn't valuable enough. And so I was placing it on myself to go, I have to be the one to add the value. When in reality, yes, we do all the things to add the value. You've been to our events.
All of them.
It is also their responsibility to find the value and create it for themselves. And so when that shift happened of, hey, this is not all my responsibility, because I was taking full responsibility. And I will tell you, even the emails you get after events when you're in that energy are like so different. And when you take and speak about it from stage of, it's really important that you guys all take responsibility for what happens here and what you take and what you make happen, what conversations you have. And like, don't look at me to make a transformation for you because we're going to give you all the info that we can, but you have to do that for yourself in this room. Everything changed. Like everything changed, right down to the lines that we do with pictures, down to like how people like are just respect boundaries at events and don't corner you. And people need to hear this because somewhere in their life, they're getting exhausted while they're in their dream and they're not realizing they're in their dream.
Okay, that's so insightful because I think, so it's interesting because I'm in Chris's, like, you obviously know this, I'm in Chris's mastermind. And one of the things someone asked me recently was they're like, oh, I'm thinking about doing it next year. Like, what do you think of learning from Chris and all of that? And I was like, I've been learning from Chris for years. Love the Chris. Like, everyone knows that.
Chris.
Yeah.
Love the Krister.
Yeah, check my Instagram. But I was like, but Chris is almost like, I don't want to say the least impressive part of the mastermind because that's not the truth, but like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's actually like not about Chris. Chris
Totally.
facilitates the room. He adds tremendous value everywhere that he goes, but it's actually about the people inside the room. And it's like, I was noticing like I wasn't doing a good job showing up after, like went to the event, had an incredible time, made all these connections. And I'm used to going and being like, okay, these are the people I should follow up with. And I was totally overwhelmed.
Yep.
Because I was in imposter syndrome. I was like, these people are like multi-million-dollar businesses. I squeezed into this room. Like, this was like my life goal. I'm like, I have nothing left. But it was like, I just felt like I didn't do it justice. And I had so much imposter syndrome around making those connections and all that. But what I realized about that room is it wasn't really even about Chris. And it was about the people and he trains us to look for that and to like be like that, like where in the way that he shows up, the boundaries that he sets, and when he's there he's so present, but then when he's not there everyone's connecting with each other. And I think that that's really beautiful in terms of like the types of relationships that you guys have built, because everyone loves all the rooms. That's why you have so many people who come over and over and over again to everything, me and Allie included. We're waiting for the we're waiting for the harder credit card to start. The Amex line. But like I just think it's really interesting that that's been such a priority for you guys in the way you've built your events, is that it's really about the people and you've been able to protect some of that energy.
Well, you learn really quick that if it's about you, the transformations, like they rely on you. It's a crutch. So what happens is like, we notice with our people, they go and actually do stuff. Like they go and create amazing things. They have, you look at you and Allie have these incredible networks around you and all of these friends, and you're getting invited to amazing things. Why? Because you did the reps like in the room. And so you see, it used to be a past thing. It's not as much, but like truly like the gurus who just like, you know, look to the people on stage, and it's like they have the same people at their events for 8 years, which is great, but not all the same people. You know what I mean? It's like, you need to make sure that people are making progress. And so it's, I mean, super simple, but it's like you're teaching someone to fish because they can't rely on you. So what are you going to go do in the world? It's just a skill set. And the room is like practice ground. So that's why the mastermind is so great, is because you get the same people who are in it. Like you're all committed to growth. You're all committed to like being this maybe weird, awkward version at first who's like, you know, saying their 30-second intros, who's like, you know, then kind of talking about your business, then asking for things that you need in your business, and then like making networking connections outside of it. Like it's all just reps for what the real world, people who are really successful in the real world, how they operate.
Thanks so much for listening to Community with me, Kristina Bartold, and I'm just so excited to continue the conversations. If you're looking to grow your community and learn more about social, join us at thesocialbusinessclub.ca and use the code podcast to get your first month for $1. Share this episode with your friends and on social, or leave a review. It means the world.